Here with all of you today. And okay, is there some echo? It is too close. Just shift this a little bit further. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is good now. So let's begin with a small prayer. You can fold your hands, take a deep breath, and try to repeat after me. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Once more, take a deep breath and then try to draw the Om as long as possible. Om. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. One deep breath and then Om. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you. So today I'll speak on how bhakti can give us pacification and purification of the mind. How bhakti can give us mental peace and happiness. So this will be based on Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text 35. I'll read the Sanskrit and I'll explain the meaning and then we will recite it. So it's Shri Bhagavan Vach. Krishna, Bhagavan is speaking over here. Shri Bhagavan Vach. Then he said, Krishna is speaking, Asamshayam, undoubtedly. Previously, Arjuna has stated that. What is this coming here? So, Asamshayam, undoubtedly, Mahabaho, Arjuna, you are powerful. Undoubtedly, it is true. Asamshayam Mahabaho. So, Arjuna has said in the previous words, it is very difficult. And Krishna is agreeing, undoubtedly it is true. Mano, the mind is durnigraha. It is very difficult to restrain. Why? Mano durnigraham chalam. But then he says, yes, it's difficult, but it is possible. There's two things. Abhyasa. Abhyasa means by practice. Abhyasena tu kaunteya. The two is kaunteya is Arjuna. The first part is abhyasa. The second part is vairagya. Vairagya is distancing or detachment. Vairagya grihiyate. Grihiyate means you can get a grip over the mind. The mind is restless, running here and there, but you can get a grip on it. वैराग्येन च गृह्यते. So we recite once more and then we'll one time last recite together. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Aho. Graham Charan. Sentu Kaunteya. Vairagena Chakruviyate. And last two together on this. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Asam Charan Maha. So here, Krishna is very empathically, not emphatically, but empathically, in a very understanding mood, telling us that, or to Arjuna, that we have something inside us which tends to grow quite loudly, which is very restless. And that is something which we also need to control. So when you come for programs like this, where you hear the kirtan, do some puja, you feel that the mind becomes a little peaceful. We feel good internally. And our life would be so much better if that kind of calm and good feeling could be steady. How to get to that is what the Bhagavad Gita guides us towards. So let's see what the Gita is saying. I'll talk about this in three broad parts. I will talk about the concept of the mind. What exactly is the mind? Before we can learn how to manage the mind. Then, after that, we'll talk about the conceptions within the mind, how they are formed, and why the mind acts the way it does. And then we'll talk about control, how to control and manage the mind. It is not just control, it is actually we connect with the mind, but control is one aspect of the mind. So we'll talk about these three things. Gruyate means to get a grasp on it. So what exactly is the mind? The Bhagavad Gita explains that the self is three levels. So there is the body, there is the soul, and in between them, there is the mind. So the mind is the intermediate between our physical side and our spiritual side. If we consider a computer system, a rough analogy would be there's the hardware, the software, and the user. The hardware is like the body, the software is the mind, and the user is the soul. In contemporary society today, we have a situation where the hardware has been dramatically improved, but the software seems to be more and more malfunctioning. That's why we have far more comforts and facilities today than what people even 50 years ago could imagine also. What even royalty 500 years ago could not have. We have air conditioning, we have air transport, we have telecommunications. At a physical level, we are far more comfortable than the past. Unfortunately, there seem to be more and more people who are actually sad. Now, sad It doesn't just when I'm unhappy. Sad actually conveys the three biggest mental health problems that are there: stress, anxiety, and depression. So this is something which is very widespread. And now, of course, there are other things which come up. There's addiction, but that's more specific. We all have here's a mind inside. And so it's ironic that while we are progressing at the physical level, but at a mental level, we seem to be regressing. And the result is many people today are comfortably unhappy. So, our comforts is far more than what the previous generation had. But somehow, happiness seems to be eluding us. This is because, at one level, the progress that we have made is lopsided. In one dimension, we have progressed a lot. In the other dimension, we have not. So, the mind is the link between the body and the soul. And we have addressed the body's needs and even the body's desires quite a bit. But the mind and its needs have not been addressed. And that is why this ironical situation is coming up. Now, to get a clearer understanding of the mind, as if the mind is like the software. It's true, but these three are also distinct levels of reality. So we have the soul, the mind, and the body. And now the Gita explains from the soul, consciousness is the energy of the soul. Chaitanya comes from the Atma. So consciousness is the energy of the soul that comes from the soul and then goes outward through the mind to the body. So for example, this flashlight, this is the soul. And then the beam of light coming from it is the consciousness. Now if I put my palm like this, can you see the light right now? No. Now, if I move it slightly, if I do it like this, you will not see the light at all. Now, if I do it like this, the light will go upwards. Like this, light will go downwards. If I keep it like this, then the light comes out. So for us, the mind is the passageway through which the light of consciousness comes out to the outer world. So we could say that the soul is the root of consciousness, and the mind is the root of consciousness, or in the different words, is the route of consciousness, the passageway through which the consciousness comes to the outer. And when we say our mind is agitated, the mind is restless, essentially what is happening is that the soul and the body and the soul are here, but the mind sometimes goes away. So say if you consider this to the timeline, and the past, present, and future. So when the mind gets caught in the past, then at that time, part of our consciousness comes outward, but maybe most of our consciousness gets caught in the mind. And sometimes this is when we say we become absent-minded. Absent-minded means the person is present, but their mind is absent. That's why we talk with someone and we see that their eyes are looking at a little glazed look. Earth to you, which planet do you want? Come back now. So basically, the mind wanders on. Sometimes when we are hearing a long talk, then during the talk, the mind goes for a walk. There is some sudden humor, the mind of them, like, what was the joke? I want to know the joke. So basically, when the mind goes off like this, that is when we get distracted. But a distraction, it can be sometimes funny, it can sometimes be humorous, or harmless. But when it becomes too much, so basically when the mind gets caught in the past and keeps replaying the bad things that have happened to us in the past, that's when we tend to get caught in depression. I tried this didn't work out. I tried that didn't work out. And I did this, and this person treated me like this. That person betrayed me. I let myself down. When the mind gets caught in the past and keeps replaying the negative events in the past, that is when we get caught in depression. Conversely, when the mind gets caught in the future and we start worrying about what happens, what if that happens, that goes on, what if I become a fool? And that is when what happens? We get anxiety. And when this also is a major problem. So now, sometimes the mind may not get caught in the past or in the present or in the future. But sometimes the mind gets overwhelmed by the present itself. That means we may have a dozen things to do, but instead of taking one thing and doing one thing, the mind just keeps, this fan is there above. When the fan goes round and round and round, it cools us down. But when our mind goes round and round and round, it heats us. So it's that. And somebody comes and makes a small request, can you do this? What? What has happened is because for many because it goes round and round and round and round. So sometimes we think that stress, one cause of it is having too many things to do. And that is definitely a cause of stress. But actually, a far greater cause of stress is not just having too many things to do. It is we all have many things to do in our life, but it's not that we are constantly stressed. It is when we have too many decisions to make. Too many decisions to make means I have to do this also, I have to do this also, I have to do this also. Which thing should I do first? Which thing should I do or not do at all? So that is what causes stress. If it's a clearly given list, okay, there is a busy day for you, you have to work to 25 things today. Tackle one thing, second thing, third thing, fourth thing. If this thing is not working, it will postpone for you. If it's clear that there are two things, we can manage them. But then, it's like if a car's wheel is moving, the car moves from one place to another. But sometimes our mind, instead of being a car's wheel which is moving, becomes like a fan. And the mind is moving, but it is not letting us move. We just get caught in our life. That's what causes stress. Basically, the mind is moving, but basically we aren't moving. Of course, in stress, sometimes we can start moving too much, too fast, and then nothing seems to work and just collapse. So we are moving. The mind is basically like it is not like a car key. It is like a fan. So basically, in all these cases, the body, mind, and soul, instead of being aligned together, they get misaligned. Sometimes, if there is you're watching a homemade video or something, it's not very nicely made. Sometimes there's a lack of sync between the audio and the video. Sometimes maybe it's some cheaply shot action movie or something like that. So the hero punches the villain, But even before the punch hits, there's a crack. So that's out of sync. So essentially, when any kind of mental dysfunction is happening, our body and mind get out of sync. And that is when we start becoming either ineffective or we start becoming, or actions start becoming counterproductive. So ineffective means, say, this is our capacity to do things. This is when we are effective. But when the mind is going this way and the body is going this way, then our net energy is only this much. So we can say that we are ineffective or under effective. And sometimes it is not just this much. Sometimes it can be that our mind is going this way and we are going this way. So then what happens is we are not only ineffective, we may also be counterproductive. That means we do one thing, and after doing one thing, we end up, maybe there's some conflict with someone, and we go there planning to resolve the issue. We talk politely, I listen to this person, and then they speak something, we just go mad. How bad do you feel? And then there was one fence which was to be mended. We went there to mend the fence, but we end up having lit fire to the whole house. So that's when we end up becoming counterproductive. So when this is happening, counterproductive is we want to mend fences. That's what we start off with. But what we end up doing is burn the house itself. So we all have seen at times after we do something, it's almost we feel as if something has possessed us. And something that possessed us made us do good. So this is how broadly we understand that the mind is extremely important because it can affect our functioning in many different ways. So this is the concept of the mind. The second part I said I talk about the conceptions within the mind. Now the conceptions, they are often in Sanskrit, they are referred to the word samskar. Now samskar has two distinct meanings. One is there are ceremonies to give positive impressions. So for example, there is Namakaran Samskar, there is Vivaha Samskar. So the idea is there are certain practices, certain rituals, certain cultural customs, they are associated with a particular activity. And then that creates impressions in us. So samskar are the ceremonies that are associated with particular activities. They create certain impressions within us. Once a year, I travel across the world, 8-9 months I'm outside India. So once a year in December, January, we take a group of Americans to India on a tour of sacred India, Vrindavan, Rishikesh. So mostly there are people are yoga students, and many of them are women, some of them men. So when we take them, they don't want to experience spirituality, they want to experience India. So in the West, as Bollywood is becoming more and more well known, so we had taken a trip last year. So they said, we want to experience the Indian weddings. So we had a devotee in our community whose wedding was there, his daughter's wedding was there. So they went there. And at the end of the tour, we asked them, what was your most memorable experience? So one of the girls, she said, many of them said their wedding was a memorable experience. So they asked, what was so memorable about it? There were 700 people, the big wedding. There is so many practices. They do this, do that, do that. But attending a wedding like that, you can never forget that you are married. Just go to a court and sign the paper. You forget also that I'm married. So, samskara refers to activities or ceremonies which are meant to create impressions now. Impressions are when something impacts our mind. It goes deep into our mind and it gets engraved over there. It reshapes our behavior. So samskar can refer to ceremonies. Samskar can also refer to impressions. What is already there in our mind. So all of us have certain impressions. So for example, say somebody in the childhood maybe was bit by a dog. And then as soon as they see a dog, they get alarmed. Now the dog itself might be a tiny poodle. But for them, it is alarming. Why? Because that impression is there. So samskara, we can say, everybody has samskar. Everybody has some scar inside their psyche. And because of that scar, their mind tends to overreact. Say, if I want to talk with someone and they're talking with someone, I tap them on the shoulder. Actually, I have to hearing. So, just as if somebody has some injury in the body, a small action will lead to a big reaction. So similarly for us, we all have some scars in our mind. And whenever we have some impressions, a small stimulus leads to a huge reaction. So essentially, when I talk about conception in the mind can mean many things. But I'm focusing on this one point that we're talking about how our mind tends to go out of control. It starts to get caught in the past or get caught in the future. So why does this happen? This is because of the impressions. So we have some scar, what happens is, you could say, there might be a small stimulus. And that stimulus may lead to a huge reaction. So now when this happens, we all can start getting a sense of what are the impressions within us. What are the things that trigger us? So basically, we are all constantly forming impressions in our mind. Every action that we do, it creates some impressions. Now, some actions create very deep impressions. Some they may create some mild impressions. Some it's almost like you don't even notice that incident happened. So it depends on various factors. But the impressions are formed not only from this life, they are also formed from our previous lives. So when we go from one life to another, essentially what happens is we have these three levels of being: the soul, mind, and body. So when there is death, at death basically the body falls. The body just falls, and then the soul along with the mind, they leave the body, the soul and the mind. These two leave. And then that soul and mind enter into another body. Now this body, its bodily characteristics are determined by the mother and the father. So the body genetic characteristics are determined by the mother and father. But the psychology, the mind is coming from the previous life. That's why sometimes even if there are two identical twins, not just twins but identical twins, the genetic characteristics are not just similar but identical. The physical characteristics are also identical. But still, psychologically and behaviorally, there is significant difference. Because the mind of each of them is a different. It has come from a previous life. So each one of us, we bring our mind from the past, and the mind has certain impressions. Let's say if you have multiple children, all children cry when they are small. But all children, even from the same parents, are not the same. All children cry, but some children cry as if they're going to bring the whole house down. So it could be they get angry, cry, they get angry. So it could be that they have some scars associated with anger. maybe not, but each one of us has a baggage that we are carrying from our past. Now, the baggage, this is the baggage of samskaras. Now, when we have this baggage, some of us have a baggage which is carry on, some of us have a check-in baggage. What that means is, if they carry on baggage, you don't know that. You have to wait for it. Just take it and move forward. But check-in means, sometimes you'll see some people are able to do something so fast. And some people, maybe somebody speaks a little hurtfully, but people think, okay, let it move. And some other people, somebody speaks hurtfully, they get so agitated. They fall apart and they say, I don't believe I will get to do something. What? But for them, because of the intention that they have in their mind, those few words have made a great impact, very severe impact. So basically, one of the key things to understand is that we have to accept the way our mind is. If we start comparing, okay, I'm so cool, the person is so cool. No, that person has a different mind. Now maybe that person is very cool, but there's a small difference between being cool and being cold. If a person is always very cool, that person can come off as cold also. Uncaring, unfeeling. That's not very healthy. So nobody has a baggage that is entirely positive. So we may have a checking baggage in one particular area, maybe get angry with you. But somebody else may get jealous. I was talking with one person in one place, and she was talking for half an hour on this completely about somebody else. And generally, whenever anybody starts a sentence, all due respect. That means what they are going to speak after that is not going to be very respectful. So, jealous of that. It should be unhappy. And what things are happening to him and what things are not happening to him. Then it's so bad and also low. That is the essence of jealousy. But then if he articulated it, he didn't realize it. He's not a bad person. But that was just the way his mind was functioning in the real life. So we need to accept and acknowledge the way mind is. If we don't accept or acknowledge it, then our mind will constantly be burdening and sabotaging us. So once we become aware, then we can move forward. So conceptions means, so how do we understand what kind of impressions do I have? So to understand these impressions, basically we observe ourselves. And this is where interacting with different people helps. Because I may react in a particular way and I may think something normal way to it. But when we meet somebody else, that person reacts in a completely different way. Oh, really? This is also it's also one way to speak. And especially if we have spiritual association, therapy association, and we will see how somebody who has shared most of their baggage, how they respond. It's so much over here. There is so much stability, there is so much resilience over here. So we observe ourselves. Now, how do we observe ourselves? It is by, in one sense, observing others. That's also one way to observe us. Not necessarily to compare the negative. And some people say, don't compare yourself with others. Well, the problem is not in comparing yourself. The problem is in having a comparing mentality. Comparing is unavoidable in life. I mean, I will not compare, but the world is going to compare. Sit for a competitive exam, we apply for a job, there's going to be compare. But comparing mentality is where we can't stop comparing. Constantly. This wasn't like this, this wasn't like this. So comparing is functional. If I have to get something out from my top shelf, I say, okay, I'm not tall enough, you're tall. Don't compare. Well, why not compare? It's functionally helpful. The problem is, so when you're observing others, comparing is okay, but having a comparing mentality, that is definitely a problem. So comparing mentality is where compulsively, chronically comparing. And then that can create insecurity, that can create sense of worthlessness. But so we observe others and see how, okay, this person responded this way, I have to respond this way. But this kind of observation is not meant to beat ourselves down. Oh, this person is so calm and I'm so hot. No, we just understand this. So when we are observing ourselves, it is best to do this with an attitude of curiosity, not with an attitude of judgment. So, observe what Krishna says, Uddhare Atmanatmanam Natmanam Vasavati. Advaya Atmanadanthu Atmiyo Vipura. Elevate yourself with yourself. Don't degrade yourself with yourself. Because you can be your own friend and you can be your own enemy. The idea is, if it unsettles our mind, how does my mind let me observe? So have an attitude of curiosity. And then we note, as we observe ourselves, okay, these are the times when my reactions seem to be very different from others. And then we understand. And this way, at least we become aware. Now, awareness itself is not the solution, but awareness is the first step to a solution. Okay, I tend to be a little insecure. I tend to be a little short-tempered. Maybe I tend to get captivated by things. Some people, they're just vulnerable. It sees new object, they shiny new object. Oh, I want to buy it. I want to get it. Just like there can be alcoholism, there is shopaholism. Shopaholism is shop till you drop. Just can't stop shopping. Well, if that is my weakness, it's okay. Maybe if I'm going to go to shopping mall, maybe I shouldn't go with a huge amount of money or the unplanned list. We prepare us. So basically, when we observe ourselves, so observing ourselves is the first step for reforming ourselves. And then comes the last part. We talk about concepts, and I talk about conceptions. And then the third point is control. Control. So you can talk about control or you can talk about cure. Now, how do we, if we have some inner wounds, we have some unhealthy samskaras, how do we heal those? And that is what Krishna is talking in this particular verse. Abhyasa and Vairagya. So one good thing about the mind is that, as it's like a software, that means there is some programming over it. But fortunately, the mind is not just a program device, it's a programmable device. So whatever we do, it is constantly reprogramming the mind. So abhyasa literally means practice. But what it means is practice of the positive. And vairagya means distance from the negative. So we all have certain impressions inside us. Now we can't change those impressions. But we can't delete those impressions, but we can override those impressions. We can form new impressions on top of these impressions. So what does this practice and distance basically mean? It essentially means if somebody has a particular negative impression inside me. So let's try to look at it from another perspective. There's this small thing in India. Any of you have heard of this? Okay. So suppose somebody on their phone has visited a website called Bollywood.com. Maybe they visited 10 times, 50 times, 100 times. And now they come to a spiritual talk like this. And they hear about the Bhagavad Gita. Hey, Bhagavad Gita sounds a little interesting. I want to know more about it. So they open their browser and start typing Bhagavad Gita. And they type B. What happens? Bollywood comes as an autocomplete. Now, they didn't want to go to Bollywood.com, but it will just come as Bollywood. And if they're not very attentive, the B is there, Bollywood.com comes, and they go to Bollywood.com and Bhagavad Gita is forgotten. They spend time over there. But at this point, if somehow they push on and type the full Bhagavad Gita, so it's quite a huge labor typing 12 full letters. Type one letter and press enter, it's really easy. 12 letters require more effort. But if they type bhagavad-gita.com, they won't know. And if they just keep visiting it once, twice, 10 times, 20 times, after some time, when they type B, what will come as autocomplete? Bhagavad-gita.com. So this is abhyasa. Abhyasa means just keep repeating the positive. So, for example, whenever somebody speaks something hurtfully to us, that is hurtful to us, our tendency is to get back at us. I won't take a few deep breaths. I'm going to chant some Hare Krishna. Just calm myself. Now, the first tendency will be take back. Depends. Chant. It's a real push. Keep doing that. Keep doing that. Healthier habits will also be formed as intentions. And in this way, the abhyasa, what it does is that it helps us change the impressions. And then the other part is vairagya. Now, vairagya, it does not have to mean that we have to renounce the world and go to a forest. Vairagya essentially means that we create some distance between us and the things that agitate us, that bring out the worst in us. Say, suppose somebody is an alcoholic and they're trying to recover from alcoholism. Now they're trying to recover from alcoholism, but their house is right next to a bar. Now, if their house is right next to a bar, then there will be no bar for them to go to the bar. The urge comes and immediately go there. Now, some people don't have their house next to a bar or a bar next to their house. Some people have a bar inside their house. And then they say, it's not for me, it's for my guests. Well, there is a guest which will come in, which is called your own alcohol. And then, so we need to create some distance. Now, that creating a distance is not a full solution, but it is an essential first step in the solution. So whatever triggers us, whatever agitates us, create a distance. And how do we create a distance? That will depend on circumstances. So if there is some person, just being with that person agitates us. I was in Texas, I gone for a program at Yogi's house, and they had written on their quote on their wall, all our guests make us happy. Some by arriving and some by departing. So, now, we all will have some people who need to bring out the worst ones. Now, if we know that, we can't just annihilate those people. And we can't just destroy the conditioning within us. It's there. But then we can plan that. If I have to meet this person, I'll not meet this person at the end of a long day when I'm tired and irritable. Or I'll not meet them maybe just alone. If I meet someone, that person will restrain me. So we can create our own ways of having some boundaries, having some distance. So for example, we could, if you don't want to visit Bollywood.com, then there are some apps which you can have, which can just block that. That is, as soon as you Visit Bollywood.com, immediately the program, the app gets shut down, the browser gets shut down, or it goes off to another page. So these are external aids, and they are not the full solution, but they are a vital aid. So Vairagya basically means we create a distance. Now, when we create this distance, two things happen by this. At least at that time, we don't get promoted over here. And second is the impression inside us doesn't get reinforced unwittingly. It's like, okay, I just typed by B and I didn't notice. I went to Bollywood.com, my browser saw that I went to Bollywood.com. Again, that gets refreshed. So boundaries, they don't solve the problem, but they do two things when we have this Vairagya, which essentially can be said as boundary. They avoid the triggering, you could say almost the unwitting, the unintentional triggering, they can avoid it. And the second thing that they can do is that they unwanted reinforce. Because every time it's triggered, it will get reinforced. Now, sometimes we may set the boundaries, we may create a distance, and sometimes we will still relapse. Don't want to do it. Like say, if you visit 50 times Bollywood.com or Bhagavad.com, and then one feels happy to go to Bollywood.com. It's not the end of it. Okay, don't stay there for a long time. That's what they realize. So sometimes when we are trying to change ourselves, when we are talking about, say, we're talking mind control, there are two ways of looking at it. There is a moral way of looking at it, and there is a mechanical way. Moral way means I resolved I will not do this, and still I take this whole thing. And then when we start, oh, I'm worthless, I'm useless. And then I was talking with one person who was trying to give up gaming addiction. A young man. So he said, I've been trying so many times to give up this video game. Finally, now I have given up trying to give up. So many times I tried, I just couldn't give up, so I have given up. Well, no need for that. Even if you relapse, it's not the end of it. So when we see mind control from a moral perspective, start making moral evaluations about ourselves or about others, based on whether they relapse into a particular behavior or not. And there is a time and place for that. Especially somebody is doing very seriously wrong activities, somebody doing criminal activities, somebody is doing seriously consequential activities. Then if somebody is gambling and losing a lot of money, then we may have to make a moral evaluation that, it cannot be trusted with me. So that is fine. But for most of the times, it is best to see the mind from a mechanical perspective. Mechanical perspective means what? Like, okay, there was a relapse. Relapse means the impression the mind got triggered and we did something again. That is the impression was reinforced. But that is not the end of the moment. We always have the opportunity to form new impressions. So sometimes we may succeed in Vairagya in creating those boundaries and enforcing those boundaries. Sometimes but overall, the focus can be more on Abhyasa than on Vairagya. Focus more on, not on, I won't visit Bollywood. Focus more on, I will visit. And this is where, I conclude with this last point, this is where Bhakti is extremely powerful. It's not Bhakti, sometimes people think, there are so many rituals in this. Well, rituals themselves are not a bad thing. There is rituals and there are ritualistic actions. So when something is done ritualistically, that means that you do it without thinking, without planning, just do it without any emotion or attention. Just do it because I have to do it. That ritualistic action is not very healthy. But rituals, basically, what they do is they tap the power of repetition in reprogramming the mind. So when we say do kirtans, It is, we don't have to chant a new mantra in each day. We chant the same mantra again and again. By that, what is happening is that impression is being tapped. That impression is being reinforced, formed and reinforced to the mind. So when we wake up and pray, then at that time, we might say it's a ritual. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong intrinsically in rituals. There are many self-help and personal growth books will talk about, say, the CEO has these 3 morning rituals. I wake up and I meditate, I wake up and journal, I wake up and go and do some exercise. Those can be also called as rituals. Basically, rituals essentially means that when we start including something in our life as a ritual, that means there is not too much mental effort required to do that. We can put our mental effort into the activity, we can put our attention into it. But when something becomes a ritual, it becomes a habit, we don't have to struggle with ourselves. Should I do this? Should I not do this? We can skip it. No, the ritual means it becomes a part of us and we start doing it almost involuntarily. Involuntarily is not unconsciously. We are conscious while doing it. But we don't have to push ourselves. So it will become happening. It will happen gradually. And some of us had an upbringing where certain devotional rituals are a part of our life. And that is a very positive starting point we have. And we can build on this. And now these impressions, the impressions that are formed by bhakti practices, they have a very powerful capacity to reprogram them. Generally, any activity that we do, it creates impressions, positive or negative. That applies to all activities in life. But bhakti is not just an activity like any other. Bhakti is an activity which connects us with the Supreme Divinity, the all power, all pure and all powerful Krishna. And then when we connect with Krishna, it's Krishna brings in a flood of positivity into our consciousness. Like say if there is some dirt and I want to clean the floor, and then I just pour some water and then put some mop and try to sweep it. And then if I have a pipe and that pipe is connected to a powerful to a water tank, and I just put the pipe, everything that is there in the dirt will get cleansed. Because here it's not just we putting water, there's a force from the pump, force from the tank through the pipe that is coming. So bhakti is at one level an activity that we are doing. But at another level, bhakti is an activity that is giving us access to God's power. And therefore, the cleansing that happens from within through bhakti is not like any other activity. It is much more. So when we do bhakti rituals, what they are doing is, it is not just water to cleanse our consciousness, cleanse our mind, reform our mind, but it is water coming from a full tank with great force. When that happens, that has an enormous impact. And that's why you will find that even at many times certain habits she would try to give. Maybe some people have some habit, I can't stop eating this food, I can't stop giving up that activity. And sometimes people start chanting Hare Krishna and practicing bhakti, and with minimal effort, they're able to give up the. Why? Because here it is not just not doing give it up. Not so much that as forming a positive impression. Once the positive impression is formed, that removes the negative itself. That's why, towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Machittaha sarva durgahani sadat tarishas. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all obstacles by my grace. The obstacles are not just outer problems, outer conditions which are difficult, but they can also be inner conditions that are difficult. They can be overcome. So when we, for example, there are special months like Kartik when we come and do some special practices. Like say we are offering lamb to Lord Damodar. So these are special opportunities we have where we can have a little more intensified practice of it. You might be having some practice regularly, but the bhakti practice is more intensified, and there's a little more accelerated transformation of the mind. And thus, our mind can become more of our friend and less of an enemy. This is how bhakti can transform us. Transform our mind. So I summarize what I discussed today. I discussed 3 points. The first was we try to understand the concept of the mind. The mind is basically like a link between the soul and the body. The mind is the root of consciousness. The soul is the root, the origin of consciousness. And the 3 problems, stress, anxiety, depression, all come because the mind is distracted. So where our body is, our mind goes elsewhere. And that is the basic cause of the mind being restless. And then the second was conceptions. So conceptions basically we discuss about the idea of samskara. How we all have scars inside us. And these scars, they cause us small stimulus and huge reaction, disproportionate reaction. And we need to acknowledge that we have certain samskaras and we can observe them. We observe by looking at our own reactions and then comparing with others. Not for constant compulsive comparison when comparing with others, but just to understand us. So observe in a mood of curiosity, not in the mood of judgment. And then after that, discuss about control or cure. For the cures, there are 2 parts of the cure. One is abhyasa, that is practice of the positive. And the second is distance from the negative, vairagya. So give the example of how we can change the impression. Say, if there's Bollywood on our browser, how to change the bhavaita? Just repeatedly visit Bhavaita. So if we tend to have an unhealthy reaction in some situation, just try to have the healthy response. We may succeed sometimes, we may fail sometimes. So when we are doing this, try to see things from a mechanical perspective. Yeah, the mind's programming is too strong, that's why this is happening. But don't get too caught in the moral perspective. That, okay, if I am not able to give this up, that means that this impression is very strong. It may take some time. Just be patient. Focus on just doing the right thing again and again, and gradually the impression will be changed. And in bhakti, rituals, they are very powerfully transformative because they can actually give us access to the divine power of Krishna in cleansing our mind and changing the world. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Are there any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for a wonderful session. I had a question. You mentioned bhakti being very powerful as transmission agent. What if somebody is averse to bhakti? How do we bring them closer to change?
Okay, if somebody is averse to bhakti, then again, it's a matter of samskaras. Maybe they have had some negative impressions with respect to bhakti. So now bhakti has many different aspects to it. So bhakti has cultural side to it. We do certain ceremonies. Bhakti has a social side to it. Social means we come out and hang out with certain people. So hang out is a very teenagerish kind of word, but okay. We spend some time with some people. So some people may not necessarily like the cultural aspect of it. Okay, come and do this puja. But they may like devotee as individual. They're a nice person. These people are polite, these people are friendly. There could be the philosophical aspect of bhakti. Some people who might be not be interested in the cultural ritual aspect, he might like to hear some wisdom. Oh, okay, this makes sense. This adds a value to my life. Then there can also be the what you can call as the volunteer aspect of it. Volunteer aspect means you try to do some seva. Because people may not necessarily be interested in chanting themselves or doing some kirtan, but okay, we are distributing this food. You come and help us as well. Then bhakti can also have some adventure aspect. We can go for sometimes there are some holy places at the top of a hill, and you go up for that, go over that, practice the top of the hill, or we can go for a retreat to a natural place. And so there are various aspects of it. So when we are trying to connect others with Krishna, what we need to do is, if this is the circle of bhakti, and this is the circle of their interests. So it is for us to find out where the two can intersect. And that's why we need to broaden our understanding of it. I was in America visiting one devotee's house. So both the husband and wife are quite dedicated devotees. Both of them are, actually, the husband is a double PhD, the wife is a PhD. And both of their children, brilliant. They had a 10, 11-year-old boy who was in the National Robotic Olympiad. So they were on the National Robotic Competition. So they told me when he was 5, 6, he was very interested in bhakti. But then he discovered robotics. And then he just into robotics, no interest in it. So then he asked me how can we interest in bhakti? So then I started talking with him. So when I asked him a few questions about robotics, Ganga opened up from his mouth. It was so amazing. And I asked him, okay, when you have these robotic competitions, where do you get your ideas for making the robot models? So he said, mostly we make robot models which are for carrying and shifting, because most of the robotics industry is being funded by Amazon right now. They want to replace the workers in their stocking warehouses with robots. So that's where we get ideas. He says, that's nice. If somebody has some new ideas, are they appreciated? Yes, of course, innovation are appreciated. I said, what do you think of making a robot of Krishna speaking the Bhagavad Gita verses? That's not a good idea. He said, he walked away. I was talking to his parents. After 5 minutes, he came back and he said, that's not actually a bad idea. Nobody else would think of something like this. So he said, and then after a week, his parents called me. Now he's reading the Bhagavad Gita to find out which verses from the Gita will sound cool on his Krishna robot. So, bhakti is quite inclusive. There are many different things involved in it. And we can try to see where their interests over it. And then once that positive comes up, then maybe they become a little more open, receptive. Then we can try to find out where they have some negative impression. Why are they averse? And gradually those impressions can also be reformed or overwritten by giving a positive impression in that direction. Okay. Thank you.
Maharajji, you said observing others. I want to go one step behind and say observing the own mind. When we observe the own mind, that is the thoughts that's running in the mind, it will improve the quality of the thoughts, right? So, say for example, two friends, they talk for a long time. And suddenly, when they meet, when they want something, they call up and they're being very nice. But if a person observes the thought coming inside the mind, that there is some intention that I want something, will that thought be pure, or it will stop doing further unnecessary or more wanting actions? Will the quality of the thoughts improve if we be aware of our own thoughts? Or
Okay.
will it
Okay, that's a good question. So if we observe our own thoughts, will that improve the quality of our thoughts? Well, certainly it can. Self-observation is good. It is also quite difficult because life is busy and there's so many thoughts which keep coming in our way. That's why I said observing others is a good starting point for observing others. If we have the habit or ability to observe ourselves, that's very good. Now, there's a problem over there also, which we need to be aware of. Generally, when we think about, say, we are thinking about thinking. That means we always have thoughts. So, sometimes we may think too little. That means we're just impulsive. Some thought comes up in our mind, immediately comes up. Like some people, between their brain and their tongue, the distance is zero. That means whatever thought comes up, immediately it comes up as words. We all need some level of filter inside. Not that every thought has to come out as words. So sometimes we think too little. And so for some people, the problem is think too much. So when you start thinking too much, you can get caught inside. I decide I won't get angry. And then I get angry. And then I get angry with myself for having got angry. I decide I will be strong, I'm not going to get depressed. I start to be down and low. So I get depressed, and then I feel depressed that I got depressed. So it is important for us to know how best we can be. So sometimes observing our mind can help us learn better how our mind functions. But sometimes in observing our mind, we can get caught in the mind. So we have to be careful. And like maybe a friend is spending a lot of time watching TV. Yeah, child is doing that, or somebody who is responsible doing that. And we say, okay, I don't know what you're watching. Well, okay, I want to learn. Okay, this is not. We say, okay, this is entertainment. Nothing so it's pretty matter. But then sometimes in watching that, we start getting so what we spend hours watching that. And we forget, okay, I was meant to evaluate this, not get caught in this. So like that, our mind also we have when we observe, it's helpful to observe, but we can get very easily get caught in the mind. So generally, observing is helpful to do when we are ourselves calm. If we are ourselves restless, then trying to observe the mind is get swept away. Maybe if you've done some prayer, there is a deep breathing, maybe when we are really relaxed, then we can observe them. The specific example that you say that, okay, when somebody is being nice to us, should we evaluate if this person has some intention? Yeah, of course, we can't be naive. We don't want to be exploited by people.
The person is being nice. If that person observes it, will it come? The whole point.
Okay, so it can be nice. Is it observing that is helpful? So sometimes we may be feeling very down, but we meet someone and want to be courteous. So we want to be polite, we want to smile. We not feel like smiling, but we know I don't want to greet this person with a sullen face. So being self-observant is helpful. Thank you. Last question before we stop. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Shri Prabhupada ki.